a lot of decomposed sulfides in there, and sulfur. Of course, this is my pile of rocks from the shaft itself. It's got a lot of gold in it too. The dirt has gold in it even. I'm just filling it around the shaft, trying to get it filled to the surface. This is our watchdog. We found 3 puppies out on the highway. My wife loves animals, and we couldn't leave them out on the highway, so we found homes for two of them, and we kept this one. That's his first job, watching this bucket here. He's half collie and half golden retriever. He's the best dog I've ever had in my life. I had a pipe here under this dirt pile that we were pumping water through when we were pumping out that hole, and I had to hook up to it, so I hooked up to this pipe that I welded into the shaft here, and I connected up to this pipe, so now I can pump water out of that shaft down here, all the way down the creek, down to the Second Broad River, a mile and a half away. I've got a special flight dewatering pump in the bottom of that shaft that pumps 800 gallons a minute. You can see I have a piece of plywood to stand on. It's setting on those 2 4-inch channel irons I welded across there. And of course, if you step on the end, it tips. That's how it's having to work all the way for a whole year. There's a good view of that ore pile, and there's another ore pile, another place that we have to process the gold out of. I'm just filling in around there, compacting it. Now the bridge builder allowed me to use his concrete forms. So that's his concrete forms that I had for the shaft. I'm going to use them now to form up to pour a concrete collar, 1 foot thick, around the shaft. Now right here is the vein is exposed at the surface. See, I told you I originally hit that vein 2 foot below the surface. Right there, you can dig down 2 feet and hit the tip of that vein. I called this portion of it Julius's vein because Julius would come over when he was quite old and not able to do much. He would walk around on the top of that pile looking for good pieces of ore, but he also would walk back here and chip out little pieces of ore out of there to see if he could find some free gold, and then we'd put it in a bucket, and it's all stored around the property in buckets right now. He wouldn't take anything home. He just wanted to look at it and see it. It was very exciting for him. I had all my rebars piled here where it was dry, and now it rained, and they ended up in a pile of mud, so I was still working with mud. This is that trail up the hill where that original well drilling truck went up there and drilled a hole looking for blue granite. Now this hole was filled completely in, 85 foot deep. This is the size of that hole. It's the size of a football field. There's the concrete forms. So I formed it up for the shaft collar. Nothing is menacing anymore. I can drive down anywhere I want with a tricycle if I want. Except on this wall here, I can't even jump down there. Now this is a 760 cubic foot a minute air compressor run by a V12 Deutz diesel engine. I bought this for $6,000 at an auction. It's a $58,000 machine. It's got 800 hours on it. I think it's something like 2 or 3 years old. That's the air compressor I'm going to use to run the air drills for drilling down in the shaft. Starting to put rebars in the forms for the concrete. Now here I got all the rebars in, and I've got these bolts. There's 70 bolts here welded to the rebars. That's going to hold the head frame down. I'm going to set the head frame down over those bolts and put nuts on to hold it in place. Now these rebars go into the ground, but there's rubber tape around those rebars, so this is not grounded. Now these copper ground rods here are grounded, so if I want to ground this head frame, all I have to do is hook these copper cables to that head frame, and that will be grounded. I have also isolated that steel from the steel in the shaft, because the shaft itself is grounded. It's hooked on to blue granite. It's grounded by the rebars and the concrete. All my joints are all welded together. This is all scrap reinforcing rods that the State Highway Commission would not use because they was excess from a job and they would have a speck of rust on it and they would not allow them to use it on a new highway. So I would buy the stuff at 1/5 of its cost, new cost, and use it in this construction. That's just the head frame. I haven't got the new ladder on there yet. Now I had to make a mound of concrete on an angle to mount my winch, because my winch was made in 1942 to unload ships in New York Harbor, and it had to be set on an angle like this. Because when the cable was going up this way and down over the head frame to lift this ore car and man cage out, it would be pulling up on this. And it would actually pull the bearing caps off if this winch was mounted horizontal like this. So I had to build this mounted concrete to mount it on an angle, 45-degree angle. Now these are the rebars I bought that were already bent, and so I used them already bent. I just incorporated them into my design for this here mounted concrete. Those rebars are 1.25 inches thick. Now I'm putting plywood on. I'm bolting it onto the rebars. You can see I have space between the plywood and the rebars for the concrete, and this is all going to be solid concrete here. These are the bolts that are going to hold the winch down. Those 8 bolts. So there I bolted the plywood to the rebars, and I decided, well, that isn't going to hold the concrete in. So then I decided to put these 4-inch channel irons on and bolted that on the outside of the plywood, and I decided that the rebars might not hold, they might bend. So then I finally welded these rebars together right here in the corners and made a steel box to hold these forms in for when I poured this concrete and filled this thing up with concrete. Now I'm going to have to pour the floor and this mound at the same time, because the 5-ton ore bucket on this end is going to weigh more than this mound of concrete. And so it would just pick this mound of concrete right off if there's a cold joint here. So I have to pour this concrete in the floor and this concrete in this mound at the same time. So it all sets up together, so we're trying to lift this whole slab of concrete, which we couldn't do, of course. It'd be too heavy. There, I'm all formed up, ready to pour the concrete in. I called the concrete company and I told them I needed the trucks to come in 20 minutes apart. I said, I need 6 trucks, 20 minutes apart. They said, that's as fast as they can make the concrete. And I said, well, then bring it in 20 minutes apart. And I said, I'm going to unload the concrete myself, and I'm going to vibrate it down with a vibrator. And they told me I was crazy. They said, you can't unload a truck in 20 minutes. I said, you just bring the 6 trucks in and I'll unload them. I hired 3 black guys to do the troweling and finishing for me, and I told the black guys that I would unload the concrete, I would vibrate it down, and all they would have to do is go across with a 2x4 screed and shake it down. That's a view showing the rebars inside that form there that we're going to pour the concrete around. And we're all set to pour there. And you can see the 20-foot of wall I've got right there. Just a sound barrier between me and the road. There's a road up there that people are driving on at all times, a gravel road. There the concrete trucks come in. I did manage to unload all the trucks coming in 20 minutes apart all by myself. I shook it down with a vibrator. These guys come across with their screed, and if they got 2 inches or an inch of concrete in front of that 2x4, I just throw my vibrator down and pull the concrete away from them. And I asked them if they wanted